I'm Mark Caro, and welcome to episode 217 of Caropop. If you'd like to throw us some support and help keep this thing going, please go to caropop.com. Our guest this week, Vince Wilburn Jr., was growing up on Chicago's South Side when his mother would get him all dressed up because his Uncle Miles, that is trumpeter-composer Miles Davis, was coming to town. Sometimes Wilburn would see his Uncle Miles perform, such as at the tiny Plug Nickel Club in Old Town. Davis also took an interest in his nephew's musical development, and by the 1980s, Wilburn was playing drums in Miles Davis's band. Now, Wilburn and two of Davis's children are overseeing the Miles Davis 100 campaign, marking the centennial of the trumpeter's birth on May 26th. Earlier this year, the Davis estate, working with Columbia Records, released the complete Live at the Plug Nickel 1965, a 10 LP, 8 CD box set covering one of jazz's legendary live engagements. This collection compiles all 7 sets performed by Davis's second great quintet on North Wells Street on December 22nd and 23rd of 1965. These recordings hadn't been released since similarly configured vinyl and CD sets on the Mosaic label back in 1995. What made these performances especially notable was that beforehand, the wunderkind drummer, Chicago's Tony Williams, had suggested a change in strategy to his bandmates, pianist and fellow Chicagoan Herbie Hancock, tenor saxophonist Wayne Shorter, and bassist Ron Carter. Williams instructed them to make anti-music instead of taking the usual approach to the standards they were performing. The idea was to play against expectations at any given moment. No one told Davis. As a result, the songs took off in wildly different directions in each repeated performance, the band seeming to invent a new musical vocabulary while Columbia's tape machines rolled. Wilburn looks back on the significance of these performances and what he learned about them firsthand in talking with Davis, as well as Wayne Shorter and Ron Carter. Not only does Wilburn reflect on Davis as a musician, but also what he was like as an uncle. Years later, Wilburn was playing with Davis on stage and on such albums as Davis's 1981 comeback, The Man with the Horn, and 1985's You're Under Arrest. Wilburn also helped produce You're Under Arrest in 1984's Decoy. What were those experiences like? Now Wilburn plays in Miles Electric Band, MEB, an all-star Davis alumni ensemble currently on tour. Which Davis periods are Wilburn's favorites? What else can we expect in this year of Davis's 100th birthday? There's so much legacy to explore, and Wilburn digs in. Please enjoy this Caropop conversation with Vince Wilburn Jr. So Vince, I saw something that you, at the tender age of 9, it says, you actually saw Miles playing at the Plug Nickel. Was that for this, or was that later?
You know, I can't remember if they were recording, but I do remember the Plug Nickel on Wells in Old Town. And I was too young to just know what was going on. It might have been recording those series of concerts, of sets, but I can't remember.
At what point did this all rub off on you wanting to be a musician?
Well, growing up in Chicago on the South Side, this is a story I always share. There was Columbia Records, Sony Music now. They used to have a regional record division guy, who would have the Midwest, one would have the West
Right.
Coast, the East Coast, and regional guys, what I'm saying, regional managers. So there was I remember this distinctly. Granville White was his name. We called him Granny. So Granny, Uncle Miles would call Granny and have Mr. White bring the records by. So he brings stacks of albums, So when they would arrive, and Columbia was making component systems too at the time. So we had the stereo and the records. And I'd just take the records and take them downstairs after they were delivered and just play them, not understanding the what I was hearing, but just gravitated toward the album covers because the great art, cover art, and then just delving into these records. I didn't understand it till years later, but I knew it was a movement. It was something because I kept, after I'd come home and I had my drum set up, do my homework, and I'd listen to these records.
What were the records you were listening to?
Well, there were anything that Uncle Miles was putting out that was new, And later on, when he saw how deep I was into the drums, he had Mr. White send me the Band of Gypsies, Jimi Hendrix,
All
because he
right.
loved Buddy Miles, the Immortal Otis Redding with Al Jackson on Stax.
That's a great record.
Oh, it's a killing record. In Time, Sly, James Brown, The Big Payback. That was one of Uncle Miles' favorite records. So there's a song in there called "Take Some, Leave Some." To this day, I play it over and over and over, and it just records that he knew would help me in my trajectory as a musician, as a drummer.
Nice.
You know.
So how is he your uncle? What's
My mother is Uncle Miles' sister.
Got it.
By an older sister by a year.
Okay. And what was he like as an uncle?
Just, he was Uncle Miles. Let me see, when my mom would get me a haircut and get me a new outfit, I knew Uncle Miles was coming to town, And when we would go to the concert, I didn't sit with my parents in the audience. I always wanted to stand in the wings with Uncle Miles and see the entire concert from another viewpoint, which is backstage, like in the wings. So Tony Williams later, he told trumpeter Wallace Roney, he knew I was going to play drums by the way I used to stare at him when I was a kid.
Right.
But that was the bird's eye view and back then at the Auditorium Theater, one of the places Uncle Miles would play, they had 4 or 5 groups on at these shows. So you see 4 or 5 different drummers, especially if Uncle Miles was the headliner, So and that's for a kid. When you're a kid, you're like starstruck and spellbound, and like all these things are happening, and you don't want to miss anything. So
you were aware of how famous he was, even though he was also just your uncle.
I was aware as a kid. Here we go. As a kid, back then you could meet the passengers when they would come to O'Hare at the gate.
Right.
Right? No TSA. So every 5, 6 steps, as we brought Uncle Miles from the gate back to the car, he gets stopped.
Huh.
And I'm like, Mom, why is everybody always stopping Uncle Miles? Not knowing, But she sat me down and explained to me, the magnitude of the man. But it's still letting me be a kid, you know what I mean? To like, oh, your uncle's famous. It wasn't like that.
I mean, would you guys like horse around, or was it always?
Oh, yeah. He thumped me upside my head and called me Neff. No, it was a very loving relationship,
Now, and Tony Williams was his young drummer in that famous, second quintet, which is on the complete Plug Nickel performances that you guys just put out. And he was a young guy. I mean, I think he was 17 when he joined the band. Mm-hmm. Were you just always driven to drums? Was he part of the reason you were driven to drums?
Yeah. Tony, all the drummers of Uncle Miles, Tony, Jack, and Al, that was it for me. And like I said, whoever was co-headlining or on the bill at these concerts. So I got a chance to meet a ton of different drummers. Then there was a guitar player by the name of Pete Cozy, who played with the fusion bands. He lived on 87th and Bennett on the South Side. So Pete would come pick me up, because my parents were cool with me letting me hang with Pete, and we would go to these concerts. And Pete always had a hookup, where we didn't have to. We'd go backstage again and check it out from backstage, from the wings. And for me, that's the best education for any musician is to see, if you have a chance to see the groups that way, and in the audience too. But Pete would pick me up and say, he'd call my parents and say, "I'm coming to get Vince. Is it okay? So and so's in town. So and so, So it could be anybody and everybody." And then we had the newspapers where we could, the Reader and certain things where I call my boys and say, "Hey man, Billy's in town," or Narda's and Billy Cobham co-headlining, or Larry Coryell. They had the Ivanhoe, Rat Souls. They had all these clubs, man. Beginnings up in Evanston. Right. I saw Jack DeJohnette at Beginnings. So. What
was it about the drums that drew you into it, as opposed to like trumpet or saxophone or guitar or any of the other instruments?
Well, it was the drummer was like the captain to me. You know, if the drummer wasn't happening, Uncle Miles said when he was a kid, he and his boys would go down to the river boats, and if the drummer didn't set his drums up right, not listen, he didn't have to play a note, but if he didn't look cool setting his drums up, they would leave.
That's so funny.
So, but I mean,
he was a pretty particular guy, your Uncle Miles.
Oh yeah, definitely. So, you know, it was just, I don't know, it's just, I always gravitated to what the drummer was doing and how he was getting into the music and how everybody was playing off of communication and playing off of whatever the drummer was doing, you know, because you could see it. You know what I mean? To see it from the audience is one thing, you know, but to see it from when you're right up on it,
sure,
it's a little different, and you can see the communication between the musicians.
Well, in this complete Live at the Plug Nickel, I mean, these performances, I mean, it seems like Tony Williams was...
the interaction.
Yeah. It seems like Tony Williams was like as in control of the band as like anyone ever was, you know, other than Miles at that point. I mean, Miles had said the band revolved around Tony, and he was the one who sort of came up with this idea of approaching this as like anti-music and playing against expectations. I mean, I assume you hear that when you're listening to that recording, that like, wow, the drummer is like really driving things in these really unusual directions.
Yeah, but Tony was fearless, you know, and I think at some point during those Plug Nickel sessions that they didn't want to play the book or the set list, you know, like every night they wanted to experiment, you know, like Uncle Ron, I call him Uncle Ron. Ron Carter said they were like in a lab, and Uncle Miles was the head chemist, you know, and they were just trying new formulas every night. And so they would always play the unexpected of what was supposed to be played, you know what I mean?
Right.
So it was like a tightrope, you know. And that's how Wayne, I talked to them about this, you know, later on, you know. It's like living, you know, on a tightrope. That's what Uncle Wayne used to say, you know. So if you can imagine, I could get an inside account for how the musicians approach this music, you know. And then Uncle Miles was at the helm of all these young cats, you know, throwing all these things at him, you know. But still under the direction of Uncle Miles, of course.
Right.
You know?
Well, it's interesting because when you think of like artists releasing music now, they release the album, then they go out and they play the album. But in this case, the quintet had recorded ESP, but the expectation was still for them to play all these standards live because that's, I think, what maybe those jazz audiences were used to. And so part of the radical shift on this was, well, let's not play them the way everyone expects them to. Let's sort of go off in these other directions, right?
Yeah, put another edge on it, you know? Because the musicians, Herbie, Ron, and Tony and Wayne was so advanced, you know, they had to venture out, you know, to the unknown.
Right.
You know.
Well, and I find it fascinating because in the liner notes of this, it talks about Columbia had set up to record this Plug Nickel stand, but they didn't tell the band, oh, we're recording this for an album. So they didn't, when they were making these decisions to sort of approach it differently, they didn't know this was all going to get recorded. And then the band didn't tell Miles how it was going to approach it and how when everyone thinks it's going up to a crescendo, we're going to get softer. And when you think it's getting softer, we're going to get louder. And so he was so there was a whole lot of kind of improvisation going on and sort of being in the moment because you had to be on your toes for that whole engagement, it sounds like.
Yeah, and you could hear it. You could hear it in the interplay of the music, you know? You know, when I now this is a story I heard when the guys first showed up at the Brownstone to play for Uncle Miles back before the tour, before they put the band together, this band, that Uncle Miles went upstairs and he listened to them on the intercom. So he was listening to them play without being, I don't know if they would have been nervous or whatever, but he wanted to hear, what they were saying without him being in their presence. You know what I mean?
Right.
So he went upstairs, and I think Philly Joe had come over or somebody. So he was listening, which was smart to do, listening to those cats work it out, over the intercom.
Yeah.
So then you kind of know what you're dealing with, what you got, what you having there.
Was there something about the Plug Nickel as a club that made it especially conducive to this kind of set of concerts?
Well, again, I was too young to really remember the club, but I guess it was they had to pick. He loved Chicago. He loved coming to Chicago. Uncle Miles did. So it was probably just when they received the tour. The cities. They picked one of his favorite cities, which was Chicago, and they happened to be the Plug Nickel, and they probably enjoyed playing the Plug Nickel.
Sounds like it was kind of a small place, like under a bakery on Wells Street. Like, I don't know, and I've tried to look into it, but it's not a club I know that much. It's before my time, but
it was super small from what I remember, and I think the bar. I think everything was. I think the bar was. And it was the bar. I think the stage was right there, So it's very intimate,
When you were going back and listening to these recordings before putting out this, package, were you struck by, kind of the audience reaction from set to set, night to night, like how it was different?
No, because I know that Uncle Miles in certain cities he felt it probably. This is what my assumption is that he felt a certain vibe, and he was really loved in Chicago, and so, every night was, you play off the reaction of the audience, and so I'm thinking that they were loving what the guys were doing, and he was loving the reaction of what they were giving out to the audience, the feedback,
right,
the back and forth,
it's considered a landmark recording, which is why you have it out in like this 8 CD, 10 LP set. Were these performances, do you think they're considered more important for Miles, for that quintet, or for jazz in general?
All of the above, because it was important because the trajectory of that group, where they were headed, the conversations that they had musically, and for jazz because Miles was at the pinnacle of where's Miles going next. People said they used to just show up at his gigs just to see what he had on. What he was wearing, which car he in some cities he would put his Ferrari right in the front of the club. And he was so hip, he was so in tune with the guys, with the music, with the club, with what he was trying to bring to the audience or give to the audience. And even when the later years when I joined the band, it was an uncanny way of him knowing what to play next, when to shift gears, what songs that would work and what wouldn't work, and how long we would play one theme and move on to the next,
Right.
If you listen to those songs on the Plug Nickel, you hear the interplay and how they shift gears, if you really do some deep listening.
Sure.
Which I know you and I have done.
No, the thing is that there's all these different versions of the same songs and they're so different from one another, and you could just hear in the moment, one of them again, like Tony's going to take over, or one of them it's like Wayne Shorter's doing something totally unexpected, and they're sort of trading off and going off in these different directions. And part of what's interesting too is that Miles, from what I understand, wasn't considered like a big fan of like avant-garde, quote unquote, jazz. But he also was someone who innovated a lot and did push jazz into uncharted territory, but it wasn't the same as, what you would maybe say like the free jazz avant-garde people were doing at the time.
Yeah, I mean, he was always evolving, So, like you said, each tune would take a shape and take a different direction every night, And that's the beauty of playing with Uncle Miles. When years later in the 80s when we played with him, the second song in the set list was a blues. And I'll tell you, it seemed like he never played that same blues twice. He never repeated himself is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
Because he listened to all the tapes every day, every night, each tape. Each tape, then he would critique us. Now, I don't know what he did with those guys, but he'd call us up to his room and go over the concerts with us and what we should work on or try the next night. So he's always listening, always thinking. So I would imagine back then, all those guys were evolving. And Uncle Miles was saying, hey, let's do this, let's do that. And they knew he gave them free reign, you know?
I mean, having grown up with, again, having Uncle Miles, seeing him go through all these changes and hearing these changes, you know, after Plug Nickel, I mean, you have the whole electric period with In a Silent Way, Bitches Brew, Jack Johnson on the Corner and all of that. And then in like 84, you're his drummer. Like, how did that happen? And how did you feel all of a sudden you're Miles Davis's drummer, you know, Uncle Miles?
Everything happened so fast. You know, we had a band in Chicago. We used to rehearse in my parents' basement, and my mom's kitchen, my mom and dad's kitchen. There was a long coil cord, you know, those long. They didn't have wireless phones back then.
No. I remember getting real long cords.
So he would call and have my mom put the phone down, bring the phone down the stairs, and set it there, and listen to us rehearse, right?
And was that a jazz band you were in?
No, it's our funk band. You know, well, I mean, we played it all. You know, again, we didn't want to be classified into one style of music, so we played everything.
So your mom would like hold the phone out and and
I mean, this could go on an hour, a couple of hours, and then after we finish, he'd say, "Let me talk to Vince," and he'd critique me, pass the phone to Randy. To whoever was, you know, Randy Hall, all the guys, Bobby Irving, whoever he wanted to give them some direction or say, hey, you guys try this, you know, pass the phone. So he critiqued all of us, right? This went on for about 3-4 weeks. And then one day after the critiques, after rehearsal, he asked us if we wanted to make a record. And that was Man with the Horn. That was 79-80. Next thing you know, George Butler, who was the head of the jazz division at Columbia Records, his assistant, I'll never forget, Genevieve Stewart, called us and gave us our flight information to come to New York to rehearse and record. Put us up at the Sheridan Center and in Midtown, had limos pick us up. I mean, we thought we was, you know, we thought we were rock stars.
Sure.
You know, and I remember room service. We went crazy on the room service, ordered a bunch of room service. You know, and then you know, we got coverage in Downbeat, you know, and who were these guys who brought Miles Davis out of retirement? You know, we didn't bring him out. He just heard something in us and he was ready to say something, you know, to play a little bit. And I remember Gil Evans being at some of the sessions, you know, just in the corner, back in the corner, just chilling, you know, and then listening to what we were doing. And Stan Tonko was the engineer, and Tio Macero was the producer. So for some kids in Chicago on the South Side, I was like, man, this is like, what? You know?
Were you surprised when he invited you to do this, and were you also intimidated?
No. You didn't have time for intimidation. And when the call came, we were ready, you know. See, Uncle Miles knows, he knows what to get out of each musician. Be it Tony, be it me, be it Al, be it Jack, be it, you know, he has that uncanny knack for picking musicians for what he's trying to, you know, what project he's trying to, or what music, what styles and of music that he's trying to put together.
So what was he like to work with as a band leader in the studio and then also later on stage?
Just very on top of it, very in tune, knowing the intricacies of putting a show together, what worked, what didn't work. He could, like, he had an uncanny knack of knowing what the audience was. You know, he could feel the audience. You know, so if something didn't work out one night, he'd say we'd come back to the with the board tapes and come up, you know, meet up in his suite and plan it for the next night. You know, and it always worked. You know, he just readjusted a few things, moved the set list around, and next night it was butter. It was beautiful.
Would he give you pretty specific directions on what to play, or were you able to kind of find your own parts?
No, he'd tell us what to play. You know, and you just get in the groove and you find your way. And then when he felt that it was it, then he would say, yeah, that's it.
So you weren't You weren't able to do the Tony Williams thing of, hey, I'm going to mix it up and make him on the fly react to stuff. Let's see what Uncle Miles does when I slow it down when he thinks I'm going to speed it up.
No, for me it was he was into a Buddy Miles, a funk, just a groove thing, for me personally.
Right. It was a different period for him, and it was more groove oriented when he was doing those records.
Yeah. But he loved the open hi-hat thing that Al had, that he had Al playing,
Right.
So he said the open hi-hat made the music swing. So.
Did you enjoy it?
Loved it. Every minute of it. Miss it right now to this day. It was mind-boggling. It was it was so much happening and so hip that you just strap yourself in and just take the ride,
And now you're the band leader drummer of Miles Electric Band. Mm-hmm. What kind of era of stuff are you playing for that? And are you playing like differently than you did when you actually played with Miles?
Great question. We were I don't want to say band leader because the guys in the band are all leaders, and Daryl, Bobby, and I, we all, Bobby Irving, who's our music director, we all started out together, So it's like, and Jean-Paul Borelli's on guitar. He's from Chicago. Greg Spiro's from Chicago. So it's like we have this Chicago connection, and what we're doing, we without sounding like a tribute band, it's just our interpretation of all this great music, but our spin on it. You know what I mean? Like we do Nefertiti, or we might do, we do Jack Johnson, we do, we do a blues, but it's just the teachings of what Uncle Miles taught us, and then our interpretations of this great music, not to try to replicate any of those iconic superhero musicians that we all love.
Right.
It's just our vibe.
What's like your favorite Miles period or album?
Bitches Brew, On the Corner, ESP, Kilimanjaro, Phillies to Kilimanjaro. And I love Buck Nickel, and I love Kind of Blue. Everything. The whole catalog. So I don't really have a favorite. I just the periods. Whatever the mood I'm in.
Right. Well, and you and his kids, Aaron and Cheryl Davis, have been working together on the estate, and there's a sort of centennial celebration going on this year with him as well. Is there anything in particular you feel like people should be hearing of Miles that they haven't heard yet? Like the most important thing for people to get out of this?
I just hope that whichever period of Uncle Miles' career that anyone that you dig is just be open. This man at the home in Malibu, he didn't have Kind of Blue. He didn't listen to Kind of Blue. So, he didn't even have it in the house. So he was always changing and evolving. So my parents, my dad's friends used to have an argument about the acoustic Miles as opposed to the electric Miles. I could hear them arguing, so just the open mind and the many facets and many directions of Miles, directions of music by Miles Davis.
Right.
It's vast, so it's something for everyone. It's a place in his career for everyone to grasp to. I just gravitate to everything. To grasp on is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I was in this Vinyl Me Please club, and they did this Electric Miles box, which sounds fantastic. It's from In a Silent Way up through Big Fun, or Get On With It, maybe the last one. And
Get up with it.
Get Up With It. I know. I knew it was like saying that wrong. Right. But yeah, those are the last two of it. But it's fantastic stuff, and I knew some of it, but I didn't know a lot of it, and just sort of doing that deep dive and listening to them in sequence, it's just fascinating. And I'd heard that they were maybe going to do sort of an accompanying live electric box, but then the company went belly up. So I don't know if you were involved in those packages as well, but they're pretty cool.
We're still thinking about putting other things, other packages together. There's Agartha from Japan. I saw that band at the Auditorium. Life-changing. At one point, he had 3 guitar players: Pete Cozy, Reggie Lucas, and Dominique Aumont, cat from France.
I think that's where I knew Pete Cozy from. I was at a used record store in Minneapolis. I saw Agartha. I'm like, oh, I got to get this. And then I was just like, whoa. And I just like kept playing it, and it just like, it's hypnotic. And then Mobile Fidelity just came out with a version of that as well. So they did that. They did Dark Magas.
Oh yeah, Dark Magas. Yeah. And Tume told me that young guitar players would come to their concerts just to figure out Pete's tuning, how he tuned his guitar. You know, Pete played on all that those chess recordings of Muddy Waters and you know, bunch of Howling Wolf and you know, some of those chess sessions and Pete played amazing bass. And Pete used to have Randy and I in his basement recording some of his demos, you know, because he lived on the South Side on 87th and Bennett. So, you know, but to see that band without those guys up close and again on the side of the stage with Michael Henderson on bass, oh, it blew our minds, man. You know.
So how do you and Aaron and Cheryl work together on all of this stuff? Like, do you meet regularly? Do you have like a strategy for like the next year or two?
We just, you know, the music speaks for itself. You know, we get along. That's the first thing, you know. We don't, you know, that's the important part. And we just talk about with the record labels what we want to release next. You know, it's a very thought out process with the label, with the lawyers, with the PR firm, you know. And it's a team. It's a team effort, you know. So it's so much in the catalog. We just don't want to oversaturate or over, you know. We want things to be packaged right and something different and something that we feel that the audiences and the fans would love. You know, that's so with each box set, you know, we do that with each project. I remember we did the outtakes of I can't remember what it was, but Tio Macero got upset with us because he didn't think that we should have the outtakes released, the complete outtakes. I can't remember which box set it was.
You guys have had a few, like On the Corner in a Silent Way, Bitches Brew. Some of them. I haven't gotten any of them, but I've looked at them going, huh?
Yeah, it had. I remember Tony Williams was playing tempo blocks. They were trying out some things, and Tony was playing tempo blocks, and you know. But for you diehard fans, especially musicians, they you know, they love it. You know, we loved it. We love releasing it. You know, so we took the hit from Tio. God bless Tio. Tio was very opinionated.
I'm sure. Well, I think you'd have to be if you worked with Miles for all those years.
Yeah.
And Complete Plug Nickel sessions had come out on Mosaic Records in '95. So obviously you're, 31 years later. What was the decision to come back out with this? And were there new things you could do with the recording to make them sound better after that much time?
Well, there's always, fidelity issues and ways to clean up, remix, remaster. It's just a thought process. Sony will call us, and then we'll listen to some of the test pressings, and we'll compare the differences of the different recordings. If it's better, if it's not, should be released, or if it's no different, But we've been hitting home runs. Yeah, thank God.
Well, it sounds great, but what was the decision? Was it Sony calling you guys, or you calling Sony saying, "Hey, let's do the complete live at the Plug Nickel"?
It's someone from Sony would get in touch with us and give us an idea, and then we'll say send over send over a couple of the test pressing that you're thinking about, and then we'll go back and forth, and then we'll talk to. Then it'll start shaping, and the artwork and the what photos we want. It's just a process. It starts with the music, and it starts with it starts with the recording, the actual recording, and how is this recording different than the things we've released in the past?
Right.
So we're always trying to evolve and change it up and not repeat ourselves with the releases.
So do you have other big boxes on the way?
Oh yeah. It's so much.
Is it more live stuff, or is it sort of unreleased
it's
things?
a mix. It's unreleased things. It's live things, and it's something to it's Miles 100th. So what we're trying to do is go 100 on to the next 100.
Right.
So it's a lot of music in the cans, in the vaults.
In the vaults, in the can, on the shelf.
On the corner.
On the corner, absolutely. That's a crazy record. I have like 3 different copies of that because I think Mobile Fidelity did 2, one on super vinyl and one not, and then I got it in this VMP box as well. But that's
on the corner, Big Fun. I love Big Fun, man. Jack Johnson.
No, it's fascinating stuff. Tell me more about the Miles 100 also. Like, how much is like merchandising part of this, campaign? Like, and how important is that?
It's a celebration. It's a centennial. It's a lot of different components, a lot of different moving parts, and we want to tastefully do it and celebrate the centennial. So it's a team of us. It's a team that we bounce ideas off of. We have merch, we have records. We're doing a new documentary. We have a new movie coming out with Love Story from 1949 with Miles in Paris.
Wasn't there like a dramatic movie with Don Cheadle at some point? Or
yeah. Don didn't want a biopic. Don wanted a kind of action film. So that was his directorial debut. So that's what. And then Stanley Nelson did the documentary. We won an Emmy for Birth of the Cool. I dug the Cheadle movie. Cheadle is a great friend of mine. So he didn't want to take the spin of a biopic. He didn't want to cradle to the grave. He wanted to do something different, and that was his action movie, which got some hits. Some people dug it, some people didn't, but that's my man. So,
Don Cheadle's great. I interviewed him years ago, but he's like one of those guys who he's fitting to do something with Miles because when you see him on screen, it's always truth. Like you always you believe him, whatever he's doing.
Sure. I remember he was in a movie called The Devil in a Blue Dress. He was called Mouse.
I love Mouse. He was Mouse. Then I love Devil. That's Carl Franklin.
When we received the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame award at the Waldorf in New York, backstage, you do the press. Someone said, Vince, if you were to do a movie on Miles, who do you see playing Miles? I said, Don Cheadle. I didn't know Don. So by the time we got back to L.A., Don's people, the managers and
they're
the
like,
lawyers
we're
got
in
together. Yeah. And so my thought process was Antoine Fuqua, who's another friend, to direct. But then he started doing the Equalizer, the first Equalizer.
Right.
And his fee alone took all the budget for, so.
Yeah, between that and Training Day, he went up.
He was price. Yeah. And so, but Antoine's he's a beautiful cat. And so Don said, well, hey man, as long as I have a great assistant director, I'm gonna take a stab at it. And that was Don's directorial debut. And we shot in Cincinnati, which, for cost, and so when you see New York, it's not New York, it's Cincinnati, Ohio. That's where we shot that from.
There you go.
And Don was incredible, man. Then we had, a lot of people don't know, we had private donors. Kevin Hart, Prince donated. We had a GoFundMe page, So that was kind of cool to have all these cats come, just on the strength of Don and help out.
Right. Yeah, Prince was I think he tried to collaborate with Miles once and it didn't quite work out. That was
they were going back and forth. They were sending Prince was writing things for Uncle Miles and he's sending it out to Malibu. There's a couple of things in the can that we're going to look at. We're dealing with the Prince's estate.
So, well, that's interesting. So is there actually, like recordings of Prince and Miles that are there? Because that stuff didn't come out at the time. So I always found that to be a fascinating combination because they're two out there thinkers and geniuses,
Yeah, and they respected and loved each other. So stay tuned.
That's awesome. When you were playing on stage with Miles, what was like the scariest or most amazing sort of moment experience that you had during those concerts?
he had a wireless mic, and just to see, you could feel the audience wherever he was on the stage, how they would follow him. You know what I mean? So, especially on the ballads, so you could feel the energy go wherever he was. And I remember we were playing in New Orleans once. This is a scary moment. And he was playing. Sometimes he would back up while he played. And he fell over a floor monitor. It was the Sanger Theater in New Orleans. And I jumped off the riser. And I went to help him get up, But he was okay. He got up. He said, "Fuck me, get my horn." He was more concerned about his horn not being dented or bent or destroyed, But we finished the concert. The crowd went crazy. The audience, fans went nuts, But that was a scary moment. But Giant Stadium, we played the Amnesty concert, like 85,000, 75,000 people, whatever Giant Stadium held, to see the crowds. Because we were the only jazz, there's Miles and then all these rock bands, But the power of one man with a trumpet, and that's a lot of power.
Yeah,
and that's something to behold, as anybody on stage would tell you who played with Miles. To have that people are into what's going on with us on stage, with him on stage, at at any given moment, and he had that command of the audience.
Were you just like, I have the best seat in the house every night for this?
Exactly. And he always told me never to take my eyes off of him. So I would look under the cymbals. I would always, follow wherever he was going. And he had the wireless, so he would go, like a cat.
Nice.
But it was just to see and feel what the audience was giving back to us. He's giving out and we're receiving. That's why they say when he turned his back on, he didn't turn his back on the audience. He liked the interplay of what was happening on stage, just like a conductor in an orchestra, classical music, But he loved going over to Darryl or the bass, whoever's playing bass, or going over to Schofield or Stern or whoever's playing guitar, talking, and he'll play. You ever see how he would, on the videos, he would play next to Darryl or play next to whatever band member. He loved that interplay.
Right.
I'll never forget it. It was a hell of an experience, and I'm blessed to be his nephew and blessed to have the drum chair for a minute.
That's it for episode 217 of Caropop. Thanks so much to Vince Wilburn Jr. for sharing his memories and insights of his uncle Miles Davis and letting us know how his legacy is being kept alive. The complete Live at the Plug Nickel 1965 is currently available as a 10 LP or 8 CD box set from Columbia Records. Miles Electric Band, or MEB, in which Wilburn plays drums, performs March 22nd at SF Jazz in San Francisco, March 29th at Big Ears Festival in Knoxville, Tennessee, and April 12th at Jazz St. Louis in Missouri. MEB also plans to play Pritzker Pavilion in Chicago's Millennium Park on September 5th. Go to mileselectricband.com for more information. Also, Chicago Symphony Center is presenting a Miles Davis at 100 double bill on March 27th. Go to cso.org for more information about that, and go to milesdavis.com to learn more about Davis, Wilburn, the Plug Nickel Box, and the Miles Davis 100 campaign. Caropop is produced by Chris Swake, who makes these episodes big fun. Thanks to all who support Caropop. If you'd like to throw something into the Caropop kitty, we'd be much appreciative, and I'll give you a shout-out on the next episode. Please go to caropop.com. Thanks so much for listening and being here. I'm Mark Caro. Please follow Caropop on the so-called socials at Caropopcast. You can follow me as well at Mark Caro at MarkCaro. Please share this episode, subscribe here and on YouTube, tell your friends, and return next week for another Caropop conversation. Thanks.